This show is brought to you by SalCal Real Estate Connections. Yes, welcome to the Telescope View, and we're here with the author of The Final Revelation, The Sun Project, Rick Teles, and of course yours truly, Larry Mangello. Our third member, Steve Parker, is on assignment and will not be with us tonight. In tonight's show, we're going to talk about an object that was in space named Oumuamua. And this object, we're not sure exactly what it was. We don't know if it was an asteroid, but I got a feeling, Rick, this thing may be something we really don't know what it is.
I think that's what has the whole scientific community in an uproar over this whole object, Oumuamua. And in fact, some Harvard astrophysicists suggested that this, which is basically, they believe, an interstellar object, may in fact be an alien probe. And of course, if you don't think that caused a lot of trouble, everybody was up in arms. And the problem with this space rock, or this whatever it is that it doesn't, we can't define it with our science. They just don't know what it is. It just...
Well, this thing is really doing some things that are not normal.
Well, and that's the problem with Oumuamua. And Oumuamua means messenger from afar arriving first in Hawaiian, or scout. Yeah. Which is interesting you should name it that, because why would you name it messenger from afar unless you figured there might be somebody else out there that wanted to messenger us? You would think so. But yeah, there was a number of issues that they had with Oumuamua, which they first spotted earlier in the year. And one was its speed and its trajectory. And the other one was its shape. And that had them completely confused.
Well, when you're talking a shape, what exactly are we talking about?
The thing is, I'm not going to say cigar shape because it's not round, but the thing is basically a flat rock. We have a picture of it, what they believe it looked like. It was basically a flat rock. They estimated that it's about 800 feet long by 115 feet wide by about 100 feet thick.
Wow.
And it was tumbling, which also to them, it was a little unusual that it would be tumbling. Now, the interesting thing is they didn't see it coming in. They saw it going out, which is kind of, I'm a little concerned. You didn't see this thing coming. But they believe it's interstellar. One of the reasons is because of its speed.
And how fast was it going?
196,000 miles per hour.
Wow.
Okay. That's fast. Most of the comets and asteroids that we're aware of within our solar system is about 43,000 miles an hour. So this thing was definitely hurtling along at a tremendous speed. The other thing is its trajectory. You got 196,000 miles an hour, which is, yeah, pretty quick. The other thing that kind of threw them was its trajectory. What they said is, what bothered them is it wasn't, and I'll just use the term, and then we'll explain it, it didn't have what is known as a Keplerian orbit. And we're talking about Kepler, the astronomer. Mm-hmm. And Kepler's has a bunch of laws of motion, planetary laws of motion, which basically suggest that orbits are relative to two bodies. An orbit is the reaction between two bodies, and it causes a certain type of
like
orbit.
A gravitational pull?
Kind of like a gravitational pull, right? So it's related between two bodies. And orbits typically tend to be elliptical or round because of the way things pull.
Like the solar system.
Like the solar system. And you can have a straight, a linear Keplerian orbit, but they're usually kind of symmetrical. You know, like elliptical, one side is the same as the other. It goes around. The problem is, this thing did not have a Keplerian orbit. And another reason why you don't have such an orbit, you don't have that traditional orbit, is because it's under some kind of control. All right? If something was, I'm not going to say it's non-ballistic, because ballistic pretty much goes in a straight line, but a non-ballistic object moves in different directions, which would suggest that it's under control. Well, this one had a non-Keplerian orbit, and I have a photo here of what the orbit looked like. And the thing about this orbit is that this thing came in at 196,000 miles per hour. It came, let's say it came from above, just the way that you can see the picture here. It came down and came into our solar system between Mercury and the Sun, between the orbit of Mercury and the Sun. And then it made a turn and it exited our solar system by going between the Earth and Mars. And here, A/2017 U1, that's Oumuamua. Now, if you look at that, you can see that's kind of an L-shaped orbit. that is not an elliptical orbit, almost like it came down, took a right-hand turn or a left-hand turn, and is going out in a different direction.
It almost looked like it would have been a good view.
It was looking for
somebody to look at us or Mars.
So when you see this change, and the other thing is it did speed up. Now that's not unusual for a comet when it goes by the sun because it starts to melt a little bit. It gets a situation called outgassing where you get jets of gas, which makes it speed up. But there was no evidence of outgassing, even though lately some astronomers have said, oh yes, we saw it. Well, people don't believe it. It's just that all of a sudden we're trying to force this into our definition of science and we can't seem to do it. But this is what had those Harvard astrophysicists saying this may be some type of an old form of alien probe, or perhaps even a light sail or a solar sail, an alien solar sail from an extraterrestrial race from where we don't know. So they took a look at this, and this has them wondering. And of course, the critics immediately say, well, a light sail would be smaller and thinner because a light sail or a solar sail flows on radiation from the sun, solar winds. And according to our science, it would have to be thinner. But the physicists, and it's not just Harvard, it's Smithsonian physicists as well, say that is based on our science. So once again, we run up to our science may not be right. Our science could be incorrect. So when we look at this orbit here, we're saying, what would make it turn like this? Well, perhaps it's an alien, some type of an alien probe, or there's another possible scenario. Maybe it is some type of natural object that some alien race decided to piggyback a probe on. If you wanted to travel through space at great speeds and you didn't want to create the technology either for propulsion or to carry fuel, what a great way to send a probe throughout the universe, not knowing exactly where it might be going, but have it go throughout the universe at 196,000 miles per hour to stick it on the back of some space rock.
Yeah, but in reality, don't you find it kind of odd that it went right between the two planets?
That's what has everybody up in arms. We just can't explain this by our science, and that has them concerned. But when you think of it, we tag a shark, and then from tagging that shark, we can then follow that shark all throughout the ocean. They've learned that sharks migrate in ways we never thought possible. What if we did the same thing in space? And Oumuamua could in fact be that, or it could be an alien probe that was sent out into space just so that it could learn something. Now, there's some other options here. We go into space, we launch a space vehicle, we get up into space, and we jettison this piece, and we jettison that piece, and it goes floating off into space.
Yeah,
we don't know where it goes.
Yeah, we don't know where it is.
A lot of it goes into orbit. But let's say there's an advanced alien race, and this is a piece of old technology that they may have launched 1,000 years ago, and bye, it's off into space, and now it's reached us. There's another scenario that we've talked about, and we've talked about this on the show. According to the people we talked to, and we wrote about this in the book, that an alien race has claimed they have the capability to manipulate astrophysical and geophysical events. Is it possible an alien race looked at this? They have mastery over gravitational waves and electromagnetic fields, and they said, here's this thing, it's traveling at 196,000 miles per hour. We're going to manipulate it. We're going to send it where we want to go so we can study different things. Is all this possible? It's all possible. Is it happening? Well, we have no way of knowing. But this is the scenario that has a lot of the science community up in arms at this point. The Harvard astrophysicists are not backing off on this. Okay, the critics again argue, well, it could be this and it could be that. It didn't have outgassing. It was traveling 196,000 miles per hour. It's a dark red in color, which they believe anything that's interstellar would be dark red in color. Why? I don't know the answer to that.
Did it reflect sunlight or anything?
No, that was the other problem. Well, that was the other problem. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, that was the other problem. It's very highly reflective, which is unusual would be for any comets or any asteroids that we know. And again, comets and asteroids follow a pretty much prescribed orbit. It would be a Keplerian elliptical type of orbit or a round type of orbit. And this thing just didn't do that. The other thing, and I mentioned this when we started, is you have the Smithsonian researchers talking about, is this possibly an interstellar travel or a space probe? We have Harvard astrophysicists. You have people from the European Space Agency also saying the same type of thing. Where do you even start with this scenario if you don't believe extraterrestrial life exists?
Well, it's very interesting. That's a good point.
You wouldn't even go
Why
there, right?
would you even think that?
You wouldn't even think that.
Now, the other question I have, where did this thing come from?
You know, and this is another thing. They don't know. I think not knowing has them more upset than anything else. Well, what they tried to do is, it's interesting, they didn't see it coming. They only saw it once it got kind of into our solar system between the sun and Mercury. So what they did is they tried to backtrack. And they believe it came from a constellation called Monoceros, or the Unicorn. That would be the Unicorn constellation. Now, the interesting thing about Monoceros, or the Unicorn, is we also know, and the estimate may be higher at this point, that at the very least, there's 25 exoplanets within that constellation.
Wow.
And we know that an exoplanet is a planet that is similar to Earth, that could be in the habitable zone, that could in fact have life as we have on Earth. So, curiously, it came from there. Now, where is it going? They don't know. It would have been nice to maybe tag it and to see where it's going, but the estimate right now is when it left and it exited our solar system between Earth and Mars, it was headed towards the constellation Pegasus. All right, so why is it going to Pegasus? Well, the critics will say that's just the way it is, that's the universe. The people who aren't so sure saying it looks like it took a turn and that's where it wants to go, or somebody wants it to go in that direction.
I mean, this is very strange to have this kind of an orbit. That thing is either being guided by something, or something's going on there.
And that was one of their concerns, was that they didn't see the typical outgassing that they would see with a comet or perhaps an asteroid. And what we mean by outgassing is when the surface of one of these bodies is heated, you might get gases of jets as either ice melts or other material, and that acts like a little retro rocket and might change it. And they said they saw no evidence of outgassing from this that would make it change its trajectory or change its speed. Now, since it was first discovered in the last couple of months, you have some people coming out and saying, oh yes, we've seen some outgassing, or we've seen evidence of outgassing. Well, some scientists are saying, you know, you're seeing that because you want to believe that, and that we don't really see the conclusive proof that there was any outgassing. We have the proof that it existed. We have proof, you know, physical proof what it looked like and what it was, and we have the proof of what it did. We don't have any of that other proof. We can't see that. We haven't been able to see that, so it's very unusual.
Do we know how close it came to us, Rick?
We probably, I think it was 7 million miles, if I remember right. Its closest to us was 7 million miles, which was fairly, I think that's what it was, but I could be wrong. I'd have to check that. I don't know. They believe it came from at least 7 light years away. But how close it actually came to us? Well, between us and Mars, how many miles would that be? You know, I don't know off the top of my head. So, I mean, that's close enough. But yeah, they didn't see it coming. All right, that's
really strange.
Well, and it is, and like they said, part of it's because it's high reflectivity. For some reason, they didn't see that when they should have, and its speed. They just didn't notice it because it was moving so fast.
Was there any variation in the speed?
Well, yeah. Once it passed the sun and got kind of out on its way towards Earth, past Venus, or I guess it was between Mercury and Venus, it suddenly accelerated. And some people argue, well, that was because of outgassing. But then again, there was no evidence of outgassing. We still don't really have that conclusive evidence of any type of outgassing at this point. And like they said, they're all in agreement that it is an interstellar traveler. It came from very far away. But they're also in agreement that it is behaving in ways that we cannot define with our science. Let's if we go backwards and we say, okay, maybe they're wrong, maybe it's nothing, it's just a big rock, it's tumbling through our solar system, that's fine. We go back to that comment or that discussion we just had. Why do you even go in the direction of a scenario of an extraterrestrial possibility of probe when publicly, at least, you hear science all the time trying to deny or be a little derisive of the fact that extraterrestrial life exists? Apparently, that's something they're very willing to consider. And it's something that they must, I know, speaking to some people that, they won't say it publicly, but when they're sitting in their offices and at NASA or at JPL, they talk about this all the time, that extraterrestrials probably do exist. And they also talk about that there is probably groups within our government, our military, so high up that do understand more about this than they do, and that they're just not going to release that information for a lot of good reasons. And that this exists, and then there's others that say that they may know than they're willing to share, may know more than they're willing to share. So I think this, when you look at this event, along with, the Pentagon in the last year, announcing their Advanced Aerospace Threat Investigation Project or program. Now, we know a lot of that was aimed at unidentified flying objects that might be either Chinese or Russian, but also they agreed that it might be non-terrestrial type of stuff. They're willing to admit that. That's two very credible groups. And then you have the whole discussion of Silvano Colombano from NASA Ames Research Center in his paper recently, where he said that he believes alien life may have actually visited Earth, and that we need to reconsider our science as being immature, and reconsider our thoughts on the fact that interstellar travel is possible, that radio waves may be an absolute form of communication, and we need to look elsewhere to hear from an extraterrestrial race, and that not all life within the universe may be carbon-based. It may not be. And lastly, that we are probably overlooking some very good evidence by overlooking UFO reports, granted. And I've investigated, I think, I've said over 300, maybe more than that. 99.9% of them are nothing. Misidentification of common objects, celestial events. But every now and then there's a few that can't be explained. And then we have the ancient astronaut theory, where we have archaeological finds that, in the 1800s, you couldn't explain them because we didn't have the science. We didn't know what a submarine was. We didn't know what an airplane was. But in the 21st century, when we look at some of these carvings and drawings, and we're saying, that's an airplane, that certainly reflects what an airplane might be. And hearing some of the stories handed down by ancient cultures, we have to start reconsidering our own science and our own beliefs.
Well, what I find interesting is even our government now starting to talk about a space force. Where would that ever have come from? I mean, when they're talking about something like that, there's a reason. Well,
and you've told me stories how when you were working, you would go to places, and some of the engineers would say, Star Wars, that's more real than anybody believes.
Oh yeah.
And I heard that, and they told me that the military guys that I spoke with told me that in no uncertain terms. Star Wars, there's a lot more to Star Wars and particle beam weapons and lasers than you would ever believe.
Absolutely.
It's interesting that, and you can go on TV and you can watch this, and I like to relate the stories of extraterrestrial and their technology to what we're doing, because then it makes it seem like, oh wow, you're there. The newest American aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, contains a lot of different technology, and one is they've gotten away with the steam catapults. When they launch an airplane, they're using an electromagnetic system now to do that. Okay, they're also using an electromagnetic system. They also have on board that ship a railgun, and that uses an electromagnetic system to propel a bolt, kind of like a bow and arrow or a crossbow. But the bolt travels so fast, the kinetic energy when it hits something just destroys it, and you can't really hit it because it's too fast. That's using electromagnetic fields. Now, beyond that, they also, because now they've been able to, they don't have the need to generate steam or some of those other, they have room for all their stuff. And one of the things they have room for is a laser system. And the laser system on board this ship has the capability to shoot down any incoming weapon, a bullet, a rocket, a torpedo. Because it moves at the speed of light, it can hit almost anything. So we are now talking about technology where, let's go back even to the 20th century, in the 70s or in the 80s, and you heard stories about UFOs, and we saw a beam or we saw this. We're talking about them. We use lasers for everything. We use lasers as probes to study, to identify things. We use lasers with microscopes for laser ablation to determine what something is, how it's composed, the composition of things. Back then, everybody said, "Oh, this is impossible." Now we sit here and you talk to someone, they say, "Nah, we can do that."
I mean, we even use it for measurement.
We use it for measurement. We use it to scan your groceries every day.
What's really interesting, though, is how they perfected this thing. They let the public think that we were doing this to protect us against one of our domestic enemies.
Well, you know, and Reagan said that at one of his meetings. What if wouldn't we work together if we were actually fighting a threat outside of our world? And he was trying to relate something. Now, we could go over that story. A lot of people saying, well, he had just seen a movie and then he had just seen Close Encounters. And the interesting thing is he went back to some of his people. He said, could this actually happen? And they said, yes, it could.
Absolutely.
What we know, there's a lot more, and again, for the record, I don't have a problem saying this because I believe in the people that I spoke with, and the more I see like this type of stuff and the reports from Columbano, is our government, extraterrestrial life exists, it has visited Earth, and our government knows about that. But let's level set it. This isn't a free-for-all where somebody jumps in a spaceship and says, I'm going to Earth tomorrow. No, it's a state-sponsored exploratory type of program, just like we have going on in space, that an advanced race, much like ourselves, has coming in this direction. As we wrote in the book, there are classified reports that outline what this is. There are classified reports outline who these people might be, even though we don't know exactly. Classified reports that talk about the technology and how long we've known about it. And if you go back in some of our shows, we've talked a lot about that.
Well, what's interesting is they claim that they look like us. That's what's the real interesting thing.
And you know, we've put up in the past pictures. That to me seems perfectly feasible. Because, again, I think we're looking at our future. When we talk about an extraterrestrial race, we're only talking about our own future. We might be looking in the mirror here. Someday we're going to do the same thing. We're already doing it on Mars. We talked about xenoarchaeology. Remember talking about xenoarchaeology?
Oh, yes.
You want to repeat that?
No, okay. I can't say
Xenoarchaeology is the study of extraterrestrial artifacts. And people right away will come and say that's a pseudoscience. And I'll say, well, no, it's not. Because if you go to Mars, there definitely is xenoarchaeology because we are aliens on Mars and we have left artifacts, as well as the moon, and as well as some of the other planets because we've crashed craft on there. Why isn't it possible that somebody else has done this before us? Like we said, our solar system is about 4 billion years old. There are planetary systems out there that are at least 11 billion years old, and they're not even sure how old the universe is. So, or even how big it is. So you're going to tell me all this time, which of course doesn't exist in the universe. Time is just something we use.
We use.
I mean, 4 billion years in the universe is probably nothing. How do we know? It seems a little arrogant to say we're the only ones out here. And if we're the only ones out here, whoever created this, they really kind of messed up because we're kind of a flawed species to a certain extent.
Well, it's certainly an interesting subject, boy, I'll tell you. Every time we get into it more and more, Rick, it just gets more and more interesting, you know?
And I think you're going to hear more and more as time goes on. I mean, the Vatican has come out and has had conferences on extraterrestrial life. The belief is that the Vatican knows a whole lot more than they're sharing as well. You know, the Vatican archives may have a lot of information based on the ancient astronaut theory that they're just not willing to release. And there's reasons for that, and I do understand it. And you know, I've been asked that question, and I have come around to a different way of thinking in that I don't believe that most people really are ready to accept this because it would change their beliefs, and certain things would change their own beliefs, and it might change their beliefs in their lives.
Oh yeah, major. It's a major change. Yeah. Well, Rick, I have to tell you, as usual, time is flying, and we're going to have to call it a day today, but I can't wait for our next show. And please, when you get a chance, give us an email at theviewshow@aol.com. We'd love to hear from you, and we even would love to ask if you viewers need to have a presentation, we could talk about that for a group of people. As usual, I want to thank everybody for watching, and good night.